Welcome to Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristin Harmel, Kristy Woodson Harvey, and Patti Callahan Henry are 4 longtime friends with more than 70 published books between them. Together, they host Friends and Fiction, with author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, to highlight and support independent bookstores. They discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Hey. It's Wednesday night, and we're back live, and it's time for Friends in Fiction. Let's get rolling, because we have amazing guests to get to tonight and lots more to celebrate. I'm Mary Kay Andrews.
I'm Patti Callahan Henry.
I'm Kristin Harmel.
And I'm Meg Walker.
And this is Friends in Fiction, 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories to support indie bookstores, authors, and librarians. Tonight, we have a great show in store for you. We'll be welcoming Hazel Gaynor and Katherine Reay, and T.I. Lowe will be joining for the after show. And as you might have noticed, we've got our managing director, chief cat herder, Meg Walker, standing in tonight for Kristy, who has a previous commitment.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. So since the beginning, over 3 years ago, we've been here to bring you incredible authors, hot reads, and fascinating interviews, all while supporting independent booksellers. One way you can help us support indies is to buy from them when and where you can, or to visit our own Friends in Fiction bookshop.org page, where you could find Hazel's, Katherine's, and T.I.'s books and books by these 4 authors and all of our guests at a discount. And speaking of amazing books, don't forget to join the Friends in Fiction official book club with Brenda and Lisa on their own separate Facebook page. I just joined them as a substitute co-host on Monday with Patti to talk about the secret book of Fleur Lee. It was so fun. And coming up next month, their guest is Kristin to discuss The Paris Daughter.
Yeah, now without further ado, let's welcome our guest, Hazel Gaynor.
So Hazel's an award-winning New York Times, USA Today, Irish Times, and international best-selling author. Her most recent historical novel, set in China during World War II, was published as The Bird in the Bamboo Cage in the UK, Ireland, Australia, and New Zealand, and as When We Were Young and Brave here in the US and in Canada. It was an Irish Times bestseller, a national bestseller in the US, and it was also shortlisted for the 2020 Irish Book Awards.
Hazel's work has been translated into 18 languages and is published in 25 territories to date. More to come, I am sure. She lives in Ireland and is there live with us right now, which means she is coming to us at midnight her time. And that's where she lives with her husband and her 2 children. Her new novel, The Last Lifeboat, and I love that cover, was just released last week on June 13th.
Sean, can you bring Hazel on?
Hi,
Hazel. Welcome, Hazel. We're so happy to have you.
Hazel, show everybody your T-shirt.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Show it off. I love
that. In Ireland, you're wearing a T-shirt. That's amazing.
I love it. You're awesome. You're awesome.
I wanted to surprise you guys.
That gives us one more reason to love you. Okay, so now we like to do a quick warm-up chat with guests before we dive into questions whenever we have time. And tonight we're just taking the time. Now here is my question for everybody tonight. If you had to abandon a sinking ship, which the characters in Hazel's book do, what one thing would you grab?
You know, I thought not a lot, but I thought enough about this when I was writing Surviving Savannah. And of course, I want to say a laptop, but you can't float in a lifeboat with a laptop. So after thinking about it and writing about it, I think I would grab any damn thing that floats.
Right.
That's
Smart.
my answer.
Good. Yeah, well, I was thinking about it too. And I thought I should say something, sentimental like my family. But let's face it, I'm a lifelong asthmatic. So I'm grabbing my inhaler.
For me, I think Patti has the right idea about grabbing something that floats, because like, what else matters if you can't survive, right? But I'm going to make my way over to Patti's floaty with my cell phone, because I feel like everything is on my cell phone. I mean, also my son. I'll probably grab my son too. But assuming he is safe, my cell phone on Patti's floaty. Thank you, Patti.
There you go. You're welcome. I'll share my floaty with you. Unless it's like the little piece of wood that Jack and Rose were on. And then
I know. Are you just going to shove me off and then like make a movie about me later?
Hand.
I would feel very sad.
I'll hold your cell phone.
Well, I think I would grab my family. In fact, I think honestly they would grab me, because I would be a hot mess in a situation like that. And also my son he could carry me. So I would have him then carry me over to Kathy so I could use her puffer, because I would definitely.
Meg and I go on tour together, and we have a shared inhaler a lot of the time.
Yeah. I need a Kathy with her puffer.
And then we're gonna climb onto Patti's back. She's got the only floatable.
The only reason we're not
there will be plenty of room, because she'll have shoved me off already. So you guys are all set.
But you got yourself
off the door.
Okay, Hazel, what about you? After all this research you did for this book, what would you grab?
Well, you see, I was going to say something sensible like, my beloved children, or my diary that I've obviously been keeping whilst I was in the lifeboat. But now you've got me thinking. So I think I'd probably grab a bottle of whiskey, because if you drink alcohol and you're in cold water, it can keep you warm and you may survive. So if the door with Jack and Rose isn't available and you guys have all just swum off with your essentials and left me, so maybe a bottle of whiskey to see me along.
Hazel, let me just say you do great honor to that shirt. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
And by the way, if you've got whiskey, we're all swimming over to you. So
exactly. You can share my floaty.
I'm in Ireland. We always know where the party is, right? So you come to the party.
Okay, enough of this frivolity.
Yes, let's get serious here, please.
That's right. Let's talk about diving. Do you see how I did that diving thing?
Yep.
Yeah.
Diving into this engrossing novel. If you would, tell us what the book is about, and then what is it really about?
Oh, great question. Okay, so The Last Lifeboat is set in the Second World War, in May, June of 1940, and it's inspired by the most astonishing true story. When you think you've learned and heard everything about the Second World War, and you find a whole piece of that event that you didn't know about. I read one word, and that word was sea evacuees. And this unlocked a whole story of children who were sent away from Britain by sea to Canada, Australia, New Zealand. And what happened was one of these CVAC ships taking children from Liverpool to Canada was torpedoed in the Atlantic by a German U-boat. And there was a lifeboat that was lost in the rescue effort. And The Last Lifeboat is my imagined story of that lifeboat that was lost, and what happens to the people in that lifeboat, and what happened to the people back in London and England who had put loved ones on that torpedoed ship. So it's incredibly dramatic. It has all of those human elements of survival, the what if. I think what it's really about, which I love that part of your question, is the consequence of choice. And
I love that.
What happens when we take one direction or another? And obviously at a time of war, there's often no best solution. And I have this sort of ongoing conflict and dilemma about what if and what decisions do my characters make. So just a whole other piece of the war that I didn't know about, and this remarkable story of survival and hope in the face of adversity.
Oh,
well said.
Love it. Love it.
The consequence of choices. I love that. So
yeah,
you and I talked when we both found out that we were both writing child evacuee stories.
Yeah.
I think it is so fascinating when the story gods offer up the same idea but different to two or more authors. And we both wrote about the evacuation of these children during World War II and their fates. And you know how much I loved your book. I blurbed it, and I've been talking about it on the road, telling everyone, if you want a whole different view of evacuation, check this out. It's a completely different point of view for the same evacuation. What I want to know, because I never did ask, is what inspired this story for you? Because I can point to what inspired me to write about the children. About what inspired it? What did you see or read or hear?
Yeah. Well, I think, as we all probably do, when you're sort of exploring ideas for a new book, and I was purposefully I was trying to find something unusual about the war, and I was actually looking at different ministries, and some of them sound like they're out of Harry Potter. The Ministry of Information was one of them, and I fell down this kind of rabbit hole of looking at different departments, and I found a department called the Children's Overseas Reception Board. And I was like, what's that? Children overseas? What's happening here? And I followed that thread, as we often do, and found an article on the Imperial War Museum's website where I saw that word, sea evacuees, and it went on to talk about this ship, the city of Benares, that was torpedoed, and this astonishing story of a missing lifeboat of survivors. So, yeah, I think I was looking for something. I didn't know quite what I was looking for. In amongst the Ministry of Food, here was this Ministry of Information, and that then unlocked this whole other event. And as you say, we're I think more familiar with children who were evacuated within Britain, so from the cities that were in danger of being bombed, as you so beautifully tell in the Flora Lee. But it was so strange to me to have never heard of children leaving Britain, and the choice that parents were given, do you keep them at home, or are you going to put them on this ship? And you had to apply to have your child hopefully get one of these places on a ship. So yeah, that's where it came from. And it was just immediate. I just thought, this has so many elements. I'm really fascinated by stories of survival. I'm terrified of the ocean. So this is worst possible scenario for me.
Right.
I actually get very seasick when I'm on the water. So, this was a book I probably should never have written, but maybe that morbid fascination of, goodness, what would I do? I mean, joking, I'd grab the whiskey. I don't know what, I'd probably be in a panic completely. So there was lots of interesting human drama elements that instantly sparked, those when the lights go off and you're like, yes.
Well, and it's so great because both of us, it was one phrase. For me, it was Operation Pied Piper. For you, it was sea evacuees. And when you hear something and you go ding, 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 like that, you ignore that at your own creative peril. And brava, this was beautifully done.
Absolutely. And I think, sometimes we find an idea and for whatever reason, it doesn't work for us, or it doesn't work for us at that time. And then somebody else writes it a few years later and you're like, oh, okay, I'm good with that, I think. It wasn't your story to keep. So it's very special when you do find something and it all comes together quite quickly. Operation Pied Piper, again, another fantastic phrase, piece of history, that first mass evacuation, and then the second one. So how astonishing that we'd both found those stories at the same time.
Amazing.
They should be paired. We have a question from
move over, Heather Webb.
We have a question from someone who's watching live who wants to know, Hazel, if there were some children that of the sea evacuees from the ship that were saved.
Yes. So there were over 20,000 places available for children. There were over 200,000 parents applied to have their children evacuated. So the numbers were enormous because it was feared at the time that Hitler and the Nazis were going to invade. So Britain really had to take a big decision to send the children away. So totally oversubscribed. There were about 3,000 children had been evacuated once the program started in July of 1940. The event I write about was in September 1940 and led to the immediate suspension of the program because obviously the risks were far too great. One ship had been torpedoed in August, but everybody survived. So they just continued on with the program because they said, well, look, everyone survived. So let's just keep
one little
going.
torpedo, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So there were 90 children that were on the City of Benares, the ship that was torpedoed. And 13 of those children survived. So the numbers are tragic. And obviously a very harrowing time for Britain when everybody wanted morale to be up because the Blitz was happening. So this was such a shocking, seismic event, and was, very quickly, I suppose, resulted in the whole scheme being suspended. But the story I tell in The Last Lifeboat is a fictional account of some of those children and one woman in the lifeboat, a volunteer who went with the children to escort them, and a mother in London. And it's that singular event from two very different points of view. And we move back and forth to see this event unfold through my character, Alice and Lily. And the children's voices were really important to me. I really wanted to put children in the boat and give the children a voice because children so often don't get a voice, particularly at a time of war. So it felt very important to me to give each child a very distinct narrative arc and tell their own story in the lifeboat.
Love that. Well, let's talk about those women, Alice and Lily. So as someone who's read a lot about the role of civilian women in World War II, I was fascinated by the dual points of view. And so would you talk a little bit about Lily and Alice's stories and what inspired them for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it came to me very quickly. I wanted to tell this story from the point of view of two women, but from two very different ends of the spectrum of this tragedy. Alice is actually inspired by a remarkable woman who was on that ship and was in that lifeboat called Mary Cornish. Wow. Yeah. So Mary Cornish was a music teacher in London who stepped up to act as a volunteer escort with the CVAX. And she was the only woman in that lost lifeboat. And I suppose it was assumed, therefore, that she would take most of the responsibility for the children's welfare. So my character, Alice, is very closely modelled on Mary Cornish. Mary was awarded an OBE after the event, was incredibly humble and shy, didn't want any of the fuss and attention. And there's remarkable images and footage of her in the aftermath of the event. And then Lily is really just a woman who encapsulates the ordinary working class mother, woman, left behind when the men were gone. And it's really her voice that tells a lot of ordinary women's stories of war that we don't hear very often. Her bravery, her choices are very, very different to those that we perhaps emulate and talk about as being heroic. So Lily, to me, really brought in a lot of strong women in my life, strong women I've read about who went through unimaginable ordeals on the home front, and is a mother, as am I. So I think she really encapsulates that impossible, agonizing, what on earth would you do if you're given that choice? Do you send your children overseas? Do you keep them at home with a risk of being bombed? And I adore them both. I felt so close to both women when I was writing them. And it's lovely to now be talking about them again because, you write the book, you finished the book a while ago. So it's lovely to be hearing readers' responses to Alice and Lily as well.
Yeah, so much of wartime fiction focuses on the bravery of the men on the front. So I was fascinated in The Last Lifeboat. You really address issues of desertion and conscientious objectors and men who tried to serve but failed medical exams. And I think you so rarely see that point of view.
Yes. And again, it was something that I didn't really make a conscious decision to do. When I was writing the male components in this story, I just found myself writing their slightly different experience of war. And I guess it came from having discovered this very unfamiliar piece of the war with the sea evacuees. And maybe my imagination just continued on that thread, thinking about things. I suppose we look back and assume everybody did the right thing. Everybody stepped up. Everybody was brave. And of course, there are always exceptions to the rule. And there will always be people who see things very differently. And I think we don't often give credit to those men who, for whatever reason, just couldn't make that moral stance, didn't have the whatever to see it through, or took a very different out. And I felt it was really important to share their stories as well. So I hope that the male characters who are threaded through bring a little different voice again to a more familiar story of war that we would associate with the men who went to battle and the heroics we saw up in the sky. So yeah, I really enjoyed writing those characters as well.
Made them seem very real, especially the brother who was a conscientious objector. He had to face down all the people in the village where they lived, calling him, a coward and spitting on him.
Yeah. And I think aren't we fascinated by people who do take a slightly different view, or who are, flawed in ways? I think that really adds depth and texture to a story, because we're all flawed in our own ways, and we all make the wrong decision, or yes, you are. So I think, I'm really interested in sort of people who are a bit messy, people who don't necessarily tick all of the right boxes, and how does that unravel for them? So yeah, it was really interesting to tell those different stories.
Yeah, that added just such a human element to it. I mean, to me, reading that brought the story alive in a different way. So to switch tracks a little bit, Hazel, I wanted to ask you, so for the last few days, as I'm sure you know, the world has been watching as an international group of rescue ships and aircraft try to locate a submersible that went missing while on its way to explore the Titanic. And of course, it's nearly out of air. So we wanted to ask you about it, since your first novel, The Girl Who Came Home, published in 2012, was about the Titanic. What do you think, or why do you think, that we as a society remain so fascinated by that shipwreck more than a century after it went down? What is it about the Titanic that keeps people coming back?
Gosh, yeah, it's a lot, isn't it? What we're seeing. It's really quite strange for me, because I feel like my first book, as you say, was about the Titanic, and here I am with my current release, which is a story of survival at sea in the mid-Atlantic, and it just feels like two of my books have sort of strangely come together, and I'm watching this very human drama unfold. And thinking about the parallels with The Last Lifeboat, and that agony of not knowing, that agony of worrying, and how do we hear? How do we know what's happened to our loved ones? I think, and I know there are lots of conversations happening at the minute about, should the submarine have even been anywhere near the wreck of the Titanic? Is it okay to go and visit what essentially is a mass grave? And I think the fascination is similarly the fascination that drew me to The Last Lifeboat. It's that sense of, what would I do? What would I have done? And the Titanic was one of those events that happened pre-war. So it was a story sort of drama all on its own. Subsequent years, we had so many dramas happening back to back. And I think, because the wreck is there now, and because we've had artifacts brought up, because we've heard of survivors, it makes that distant event feel very, very relatable and present. Yeah. And I think we do look back and think, would I have jumped off that into a lifeboat, or would I have stayed with my husband? What choice would I have made? Yeah. And I think it is that human fascination, the unimaginable playing out. Again, it's that morbid fascination. Yeah. And yeah, it's one of those evergreen stories, and it's incredibly, I keep getting goosebumps when I think about it, because it's as I say, it's pulling two of my books together in a really strange, quite chilling way. And we all just hope that there is time to get to them if they can find the sub. But human drama playing out in real time is just it's quite shocking to watch, isn't it? And there will be a lot of debate, I know, about should we be visiting these sites where traumatic events happened. And I think that's a conversation for another time, not now. I think we just want everybody to hopefully be found. But yeah, it's been quite a strange time for me. Yeah.
Well, Hazel, you've given us a lot to think about and talk about. And I think all of us, if you haven't read the last lifeboat, now you want to. Would you tell us before we let you go where everybody can find you online and on tour?
Yes, online, procrastinating mostly when I should be writing.
Same, right here, same.
My next book. So I'm quite straightforward. I'm at Hazel Gaynor on Instagram and Twitter. I'm Hazel Gaynor Books on Facebook, and I'm hazelgaynor.com is my website, and you can sign up for my monthly newsletter where I share lots of upcoming book news and giveaways, and all the sneaky peeks come in there.
Can't wait. Thank you again, Hazel. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tonight, Hazel. Thank
you, everyone.
Yes. Nighty night.
Exactly.
Okay, everybody. We're excited to get to Katherine Reay, but first, a few quick messages from us. And do not forget, we have an after show tonight.
Stop though. Wait first. We have something to celebrate because we were not live last week when we got the huge news, the super news, the super duper news that Kristin is number 9 on the New York Times.
Thank you, ladies.
So my granddaughter drew on the first one, and I opted not to show it.
I want to see that one.
I'll post. It's over across the room. I will post
Kathy,
it.
that's beautiful. That looks like an angry snake.
It does look like a snake.
I made Tom draw that for me, to be honest.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. You guys, I just got back from book tour a couple days ago. It was 2 solid weeks. I'm still kind of recovering. But I would say that one thing I absolutely came out of that tour with was just an intense sense of gratitude for all the people who showed up on the road, all the people who showed up online, all the people who sent me messages, and just all of you in this Friends in Fiction community who bought the book, who talked about the book, who recommended the book. We couldn't do it without you. So thank you all so much. I'm thrilled and moved and touched, but most of all grateful. So thank you.
So fun celebrating with you.
Yeah.
So fun. And don't speak in the past tense either, because the love just keeps going and going on for your book.
I know. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about being in this community is we feel it all the time, whether whether we have a new release or not. So we truly are the luckiest. I mean, I know we all feel it all the time, but we are genuinely the luckiest to have this beautiful, wonderful community of Friends and Fiction readers. I think all of us have felt it everywhere on the road, and it means so much.
Yep.
Like we've mentioned, all 4 of the fabulous Friends in Fiction host authors have new releases out this year, with Kristin's and Patti's just out, Kristy's The Summer of Songbirds coming in just 2 weeks, and Mary Kay's Bright Lights Big Christmas coming in September. To celebrate, we have some simply amazing events coming up, which means you can catch us live as a group multiple times this year. We've already been in Columbus, Charleston, and Huntsville together. And coming up this weekend, we'll be in Chicago to speak on a panel at the American Library Association annual conference. Then we'll be in Tampa on July 20th at Oxford Exchange to launch Kristy's The Summer of Songbirds. Then we'll be in Atlantic Beach, North Carolina on August 1st for a breast cancer fundraiser. And last but not least, in Darien, Connecticut on October 4th to launch Mary Kay's Bright Lights Big Christmas. So make sure you're signed up for our newsletter and for each of the 4 host authors' individual newsletters so that you're the first to know more.
Okay, now you've been listening to our Writer's Block podcast, right? It drops every Friday on all major podcasting platforms. We'll always post a link to the newest episode on our Facebook page and Instagram feed. On our most recent episode, out now, Ron and Kristy talked to Ashley Audrain about The Whispers. Coming this Friday, Ron and I will be talking to Curtis Sittenfeld about her hit novel, Romantic Comedy, which was a Reese's Book Club pick and which I also loved. So listen, review, subscribe, and share and shout with a friend if you like what you hear.
Oh, you'll like what you hear. Just you trust me. So,
I can't wait for this week's episode.
Yeah.
I know. All right.
Last week's was
Now-
great.
And we've heard another interview with her, and it was, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Now it's time for our next guest, Katherine Reay, a dear friend of mine. Katherine is a national best-selling and award-winning author with a lifelong love affair with books and with history. So luckily, she's writing historical fiction. Her newest, A Shadow in Moscow, is her 9th novel, and she's also co-written a nonfiction book.
Katherine holds a BA and MS from Northwestern University, graduating Phi Beta Kappa, and has lived across the country with a few years in England and Ireland as well.
Katherine, her husband, and 3 children currently live outside of Chicago. Her new novel, A Shadow in Moscow, was just released last week on June 13th.
Sean, can you bring Katherine on?
I'm there.
Hi.
Hi,
Boom.
Hi. Boom.
Magic.
I swear that Phi Beta Kappa thing keeps lately, and it hasn't for years. Someone's finding it, and it's in the intros. And I'm gonna have to start paying my yearly dues soon. I haven't in 20 years, and I'm going to have to.
If we keep saying it.
I know.
It's not a problem I'm ever going to have. But anyway, we love having you, Katherine. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
All right, we're going to dive into this great novel. And it's set during the Cold War, and it's told from alternating points of view. Ingrid, who lost everyone she loved in the final days of World War II, and Anya, a woman who grew up in Moscow before getting her college degree in the United States. And slowly, these points of view come together, and these 2 women begin to question the oppressive regime they've been committed to supporting. And you've said that you loved using their stories for the foundation, these 2 women's stories, to explore much larger themes. So can you talk to us about what you believe this story is really about and what those themes are?
Yeah. Okay. So yes, on the surface, it is a story about 2 women, Austrian-born Ingrid Bauer, Soviet-born Anya Koneva, one primarily spying for MI6 during the first Cold War, the second during the second Cold War for the CIA. So this compare and contrast, both reaching that point where they will betray their homeland, which is the Soviet Union, and spy for the West, MI6 and the CIA. And as you said, they come together when Aldrich Ames hands that list in 1985 to the KGB, signing the death warrants of 25 agents behind the Iron Curtain. But your question about, the story behind the story, it really is a story of sacrifice and love and courage, but primarily what gets you to that point. Anya is the character through which I sort of explored that very defined line, though both of them have it. At Georgetown, she studied Thomas More, and Thomas More had this line that he said his conscience could not cross. And so Anya starts to question, what is that line for me? Will I step back from it, or will I defy it and say, I will not follow this any further? And so it really is, it was an interesting exploration for myself as well, wondering, if I am called to show great courage, will I?
And what line will your conscience not cross?
Right. What line is it? That's the thing. It was just really interesting to explore that. And people obviously, throughout the 20th century, you were talking with Hazel about World War II. And conscientious objectors she was talking about, there are lots of lines, and we've had plenty of opportunity in human history to explore them. So it's a continuation, I guess, of those questions.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, Katherine, you've written about so many historical places and times. You last went to London, right? Like that was your last book. What inspired this novel and took you to Soviet Russia?
Well, it's really interesting. When I was studying, the SOE and the women spies of World War II, I kind of wondered, what'd you all do next? And so, like Virginia Hall came back to the United States and worked for the CIA. And so then I thought, okay, writ large, what did the spying community do next?
Yep.
And, the Cold War started, I mean, it's right on the heels of World War II. It's just this line that keeps going. And so I started wondering what changed, what didn't change. When one war stopped, how did this colder war, that never reaches that boiling point, that there's direct conflict, but it simmers all over the globe, what was going on there? So it really is a story almost of moving those chess pieces that the Cold War did. And so there were many different levels of interest, but Ingrid and Anya's voice came very quickly to me. And all of a sudden they had a story to tell, but in that new time frame.
Also, Katherine, Putin-era Russia is very much in the news right now. So did the current situation there temper your approach to writing this novel at all? And also, do you see any modern-day parallels between your story and what's unfolding in modern-day Russia?
To be honest, it did temper it in the sense that I wanted to be very cognizant that Cold War is simmering and warming up, getting hot. But to be honest, it didn't feel new. And what I mean by that is when I look back at World War I, the interwar years, that was just like lunch break. And then World War II, it is the same threads, and the Cold War continued to them. And although the Berlin Wall fell in 89, the Soviet Union fell in 91, those tensions and those ideologies that fuel those tensions, they didn't go away. And so we haven't come to anything new. We've just warmed up.
Yep.
Oh, interesting.
Really hot, something old. So.
Yeah. Well, to take a completely different tack, several of your novels, like Dear Mr. Knightley and The Austen Escape and Lizzie and Jane, were obviously Jane Austen inspired. And I know you've also said they are C.S. Lewis inspired. So I'm wondering about your transition from apparently a card-carrying Janeite to historical fiction. Now, how did that happen?
Okay, so I have not put my Janeite card down yet. There's a great scene in Shadow in Moscow where Anya compares Tolstoy to Austen. And I'm not going to tell you who comes out ahead. So but anyway, let's see. Historical fiction actually came from my first 7 novels are all contemporary. And there aren't retellings of Jane Austen. They're very contemporary novels that use Jane Austen as that common book-loving language.
Yeah.
And when I came to the Printed Letter Bookshop, I realized, it was inspired by C.S. Lewis, that book. But I realized how indelibly our past affects us, whether we are aware of it or not. And that led me to the London house, where I wanted the past to be an objective reality, not subjective memory or backstory. So that split time happened. And then I had so much fun with these spies of World War II that I just kept going into the Cold War.
I love it.
So that's how that happened. And I'm loving historical fiction. So I don't think I'm going to jump ship back to contemporary quite yet.
I mean, who doesn't love a good spy novel?
Yeah.
Right. Well, we know because we've talked to you before and followed your career, but you have loved stories all your life and they have guided you. So you have a great quote in the novel where Anya says, the best stories are love stories. So tell us what makes you say that, and what does a love story mean to you?
It actually, I think who said it best was George Steinbeck in a journal from 1937. He said that at the base level, all stories are love stories. That if man can understand, if we can understand each other better, that is the basis of a great story, and the basis of obviously of humanity is to love each other well. And I think when I think about love, I will actually go back to C.S. Lewis with those 4 types. A love story can be any type. In Lizzie and Jane, it was sisters. It's not always that romantic love. In A Shadow in Moscow, it is love of family and friends and of country and love of what one believes is right. So yes, I do. I definitely write love stories, but maybe a little unexpected twists on them.
Love that. Well, Anya also says that the why matters most. So talk to us about that and how that guided the novel for you.
Yeah. Motivation. As Hazel was talking about choice, about, what would I do? Why would I do it? Anya's handler actually says to her, if your motivation is money, and spies were paid, if your motivation is money, you will get caught, you will get killed. It is not enough to sustain the pressure and the dual persona that you will be living for as long as you are active. So your why, you have to truly believe in it. It has to be an integral part of you. And I think, I see that around us. If you've got friends who have a really great why as to who they are and what they do, it's a beautiful thing to witness.
Yes,
somebody who
I
knows
agree.
truly who they are.
Yep.
So I like exploring that. So maybe I'll catch some of that myself.
Yeah, right. So, Katherine, I know how deeply you research all of your historical fiction. Can you talk to us a little bit about the research you did for this novel? So, I mean, you had Cold War Soviet stuff, you had Vienna, you had Washington, D.C. How did you dig into all of this?
A lot was books. There's so much written. So did that big world diving into the books first. I also read the fiction of the time, a lot of John le Carré, Frederick Forsyth.
Oh, wow. Okay.
To see, what fiction writers were dealing with that time and that place. And that was really interesting. I also talked to a few former officers within the CIA who now all work for investment banks, which kind of got me a little
Interesting.
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that is, yeah.
And a few of the cultural details. I talked with a woman who grew up in the Soviet Union extensively. And there's one scene where Anya talks about collecting recycling and the hidden books within those pamphlets, and that she loved those books. And that is what Ekaterina told me about from growing up. They would collect recycling, and there'd be hidden books within the recycling pamphlets that they could collect. And so cultural details came from her. So it was a very multi-pronged approach. And in fact, in 1985, the year the book ends, I visited the USSR. And so I had a lot of those memories. I've not been back since.
That's so cool.
Well, post 91, it's going to be so different anyway.
Yeah.
All of my maps had to be pre 91 because street names changed, city names changed, parks names changed. But I remember in 85, the guard towers, the rules of what we could and could not do, and where we could not go. And so that formed that.
What were you doing there in 85? That's so interesting.
It was a family trip.
Wow.
Wow. Your family vacations differently than mine.
Yeah.
I think we went to Cypress Gardens in 1985.
Yeah, my family went to Gatlinburg.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, seriously, crazy.
Wow.
We went with my grandparents.
Wow, what an experience.
Amazing.
To think that you used it all those years later to,
know.
help educate the book. That's incredible. Yeah.
That's really
so cool.
Yeah.
Well, Katherine, you write from two women's points of view as they come to see their homeland through new eyes. How hard was it to write from a Soviet woman's point of view, and which woman was easiest to write for you?
Oh, wow. I don't know that one was easier. They were so different. But I will tell you, I had to give them extensive experience outside the Soviet Union so that I could have differences of perspective. I've moved 17 times. And so I know
my goodness.
feet on the ground that let you understand a culture. That is why actually Ingrid is Austrian born. She moves as an adult to the Soviet Union. Anya, though Soviet born, does spend her college years at Georgetown University in the US. So I wanted to give her that different experience so that I could then contrast sort of seeing things from different perspectives. So that was one thing. The easier to write. Ingrid's portion is written in third person because she is the shadow. So it was really fun writing her to kind of play with that sort of little bit of distance. Whereas Anya's voice was very strong. She's the more impetuous young and makes mistakes. First person narration. And so I guess I might say I understood her voice better, but I understood Ingrid's motivation and the way she worked maybe better.
Gotcha.
Did that come to you, that decision to do one in first and one in third? Did that come to you at the beginning of the book? I mean, did you outline it and then when you started writing think, oh, no, this character has to be first and that one has to be third? I mean, it's kind of a writer's question, but I think readers are interested too.
No, it's actually a great question. It did come to me right away because I wanted Ingrid to be shadowed. And what great way to convey that is to give that distance.
Gotcha.
So it did come to me right away. And I actually wanted us to, Anya is, I would call the main character. She's the main character of the story. Ingrid has a lesser role to play, maybe 30% of the novel. But I wanted her to be first person because I wanted us to feel everything she goes through right next to her. And I played with perspective before in the Printed Letter Bookshop. In that book, one character is third person until the halfway point when she sort of claims her voice, and then she switches to first person. So I played with those points of views previously.
Love it.
Well, that's more skillful than I could ever be. I think.
And more thoughtful.
I know.
Well, Katherine, before you go, we've loved talking to you. We could listen to you talk on and on about this book, but can you tell us about your 10-minute book club and then where viewers can find you on the road and online in coming weeks?
Yeah, so every Wednesday, my 10-minute book talk is with authors Rachel Linden and Marie Bostwick. And we talk to authors each week for 10 short, sweet minutes. So it is quick and it is really fun. And you've been on it, which is so fun. But so you can find me there on Instagram, and we're also on YouTube and Facebook with that. But other than that, it's KatherineReay.com is my website. Katherine Reay, I'm on Instagram. Katherine Reay Books, I'm on Facebook. And my tour schedule is also on my website. And perfect. I answer all my own emails. So
perfect.
I learned that, Patti. I got that from C.S. Lewis. Yeah. He wrote everybody back himself. And I was like, if Lewis can do it, so can I.
Can I. Yep.
Absolutely.
And tell everybody Reay is Reay, not
Yes, it's so true. It's Reay. It's not pronounced Reay, but it definitely is that way.
Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Katherine. We've loved having you.
Katherine.
Thank you, Katherine.
Okay, what an evening. I mean, I feel like I've gotten a master's degree in American and European history. Mm-hmm. But it's not over yet because we're welcoming T.I. Lowe on the after show in just a minute. Don't forget, you can find all our back episodes on YouTube. We'll be back next week to welcome Annabelle Monahan and Megan Miranda. And the writing pair of Mary Huddleston and Asher Paul will join us for the after show. We've got a fun episode in store for you, and we can't wait. No. We'll see you next week. But first, we'll see you in 30 seconds for the after show.
Thank you for tuning in. You can join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here.
Welcome back, everybody. Do you feel
hey!
do you feel your teeth?
Hi.
Do you feel your to be read stack going higher and higher
Yes,
and
yes,
higher.
always.
with all these
It's
amazing
gonna
authors?
fall over on me, and then I'm gonna need to be
Yeah.
rescued on Patty's door, floating in the.
You're gonna need my floaty.
I'm gonna get that bottle of whiskey that Hazel promised
Yeah,
us.
exactly.
Well, yeah, what a show tonight! From a drafty lifeboat in the North Atlantic to Russia with Love.
Yeah.
I
Love
love talking to authors. I mean, they're both so smart. I'm intimidated.
And I loved how both of them really hooked into exactly what's going on in the news right now. Like if you look at if you turn on the news, they're talking about Russia and they're talking about the Titanic, right? Like they're talking about, I don't know. It felt very timely, very timely. Yeah.
Without ever knowing that it would.
Yeah.
Right?
100%. Yep, exactly.
Well, the same thing happened to you, Patti, when you wrote Surviving Savannah, right?
Yep. And they found it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But talking to both of them too, it's such a reminder that if you're curious about something, just grab onto it and go for it, because here we are with these two amazing books. So
Absolutely.
Well, we still have a lot more in store for the after show, and that brings us to the topic of T.I. Lowe.
T.I. Lowe says she is an ordinary country girl, but I've met her numerous times, and she is more than an ordinary country girl who loves to tell extraordinary stories. She is the author of nearly 20 published novels, including her recent best-selling and critically acclaimed Under the Magnolias. And her debut breakout was called Lulu's Cafe.
So she lives with her husband and family in coastal South Carolina. Her new book, Indigo Isle, and isn't that a beautiful cover, right? It was just released earlier this month on June 6th.
Sean, can you bring T.I. on?
Hey, y'all.
How are you?
Good. Now, look, you forgot my master's and my PhD degrees.
And your Phi Beta Kappa.
Sorry.
I have master's and PhD from the University of YouTube. So,
Hey, what about your stint in the CIA and the Secret Service and the KGB?
that too. Yeah, that too.
That's a secret,
talk
Kathy.
about that in case they, come after us.
Yeah.
Oh man, I just blew her cover. I'm so sorry, T.I.
Again. Whoops, I did it again.
Okay, back to the topic at hand, which is Indigo Isle.
Yes.
The story of Sunny Bates, a movie location scout who left South Carolina 15 years ago and has returned for her latest gig. Soon she finds a private barrier island with a recluse named Hudson Renfro, who has exiled himself for years. He tends his fields of indigo and makes dye, but he has his own secrets and stories. Sunny and Hudson collide in a beautiful story. So if that is what the story is about, come on, T.I., what's it really about?
Well, it's about the CIA. I didn't mess up the joke. See, my Southern tongue, I mean, the more nervous I get, the more I sound drunk, but I'm really just nervous.
You are among friends tonight, T.I.
You are.
Fair.
So it's my Southern take on Beauty and the Beast, because I just love Beauty and the Beast. It's my favorite fairy tale. And to me, that's my favorite because I love flawed characters, because good grief, I'm a flawed one just sitting here. I mean, hello, I'm a hot mess, but I can relate to that. And so that's what it's about. But what it's really about is back in 2017, it seemed like I just was really intrigued and just overwhelmed by all the women in Hollywood that came out with the Me Too movement. And I cheered them on, and so many people cheered them on, but they had another crowd that was insinuating that, they were just doing it for publicity and whatnot. And, I hated that because they were giving themselves a voice and people were trying to take it away. And so I wanted to take a story and talk about the woman that was behind the scenes. And so that's why I decided to put Sunny Bates behind the scenes as a location scout. And this is her finding her voice through the story to stand up for, what's right. And So that's what it's really about.
Oh, I love that. And it's so interesting to hear you mention Beauty and the Beast, because I was going to ask you about that. That's one of my favorite stories, too. It's, yeah, I'm actually at Disney World right now. I'm at a Disney hotel, so I'm very much in Beauty and the Beast
jealous.
world. But I'm wondering whether you intended, when you sat down to write this, did you intend from day one to write your own sort of version of Beauty and the Beast? Or was this something that evolved as you saw the parallels between the story you were telling and this story that you so loved? Can you tell us a little bit about that process?
You know, as authors, we've always got our storytellers. I feel like I'm just a good old Southern storyteller. There's all sorts of stories always developing, and how do you want to put it together? But yeah, I've always loved Beauty and the Beast, and when I saw that back in 2017, this story's been with me for quite a while, and I needed to figure out a way to get her back close to home. It's set in Charleston, South Carolina, and she's from Georgetown, and so. The whole idea of her going to this barrier island, and he's got his barriers. He's a recluse, and so he has walls to get past. But and his, quite frankly, no trespassing on his island. He even called the cops on her. But I wanted to reflect his walls, his actual walls, with her walls, because she would put on, a front, a happy face, a smiley face, and that can be walls and barriers too that we hide behind. So it's amazing, Kristin, how, when you're in a story, how it starts developing, you're like everything starts tying together. Yeah, just so like true. Indigo. I was fascinated by indigo. It's back in the 17s, it was one of the top exports in South Carolina. And there's actually an entire indigo revival going on in the state of South Carolina. There's so many artisans and farmers that are growing the plant and harvesting the dye. And I was, oh my goodness. So I was able to go to an actual workshop where we started the day in Newberry, and you can go to Edisto Island too to do these workshops. It was back in 2019, and we went to the indigo field, and it looks like a whole bunch of weeds, but we harvested the indigo, and we took it back to our tables, and we plucked the leaves off, and then we steeped it. And it was like steeping tea. It didn't smell like tea. It smelled like collard greens cooking. If you know what collard greens smell like, it's not very pleasant. But and then at the end of the day, once our indigo was complete, the dye was extracted from the leaves. We were able to dye scarves, and this is one that I did that day.
Ooh,
oh wow! So pretty.
I
love it.
That's awesome.
Oh, how special!
And so, when you talk about how you take this theme and it correlates with your character, Sunny, she thought she was a weed. She didn't think she was good enough, and through her trials and everything that she was going through, she felt beaten and bruised. And that same thing with it went with the indigo. It was beaten and bruised, but something so beautiful can come out of it at the end.
Oh, I love that. I mean, indigo farming is so fascinating. I've spent many years of my adult life over on Defusky, where they have completely revived the ancient art of indigo. And I was at an artist thing tonight before I came on the show, and she does like flower hammering and dyeing. And I got this beautiful indigo.
Look at that.
And it made me think so much about you, because it's just gorgeous.
So gorgeous.
Oh wow.
And I mean, see, look, the flowers are hammered into it.
You can see it.
Wow. Oh my gosh, it is so gorgeous.
Patti, is the dark color the indigo? Is that what that is?
Yes. And also black-eyed Susans.
Oh,
anyway,
wow.
but when she was giving this talk this evening on the plants, and then she started describing the indigo, I'm like, I read T.I.'s book. I already know it's really, really tall, and you have to hack it off at the bottom.
And this woman's got PhD from University of YouTube. She knows what she's talking about.
She's also with the CIA. Yeah, CIA too.
You went to one. But I need to know why you decided to write about it. Like, what was the inspiration that made you say indigo, the beaten, the bruised, the weed? What inspired you to try it and to write about it?
Well, I read Indigo Girl, and it was the whole history of Eliza Lucas. And it just fascinated me. And I'm like, well, let's bring that contemporary. And it was like perfect timing, because when I decided I want to do that, there was this whole revival going on. So I was very lucky that I've heard that this year is the year of Indigo. So it's been like amazing at all the things that I find that's with Indigo now. It was just something I wanted to learn a little bit more about. And, when I set Indigo Isle, I didn't even realize how it would go so smoothly with the story of Sunny and her journey of, from start to finish. And it's just amazing how things work out that way.
It's crazy. When you follow your curiosity, that's what happens. It's really interesting.
Well, T.I., you mentioned Me Too, but so within this gorgeous story, there are also some really hard things to grapple with as we come to Sunny's redemption. And you address sexual abuse and the dilemma of what to call out and when. So why is it important to you to craft characters who go through such hard things? And was it hard for you to put Sunny through all that?
It was. My gosh, y'all, we go through so much. And I think so many times we don't feel like we have a voice to talk about it. And, with my book, Indigo Isle, if you can go back to Lulu's Cafe, Under the Magnolias, it's me wanting to give voice to hard topics. No, it's not easy to write. Life's not hard, and life's not easy. A lot of times I have to cut a joke in the middle of something hard just so I can get through it, and I do that a lot with my books too. And I felt like I couldn't give the subject justice if I didn't put Sunny through the hard times. It was hard to write those things, but I feel like you can't gloss over the hard parts, and it definitely makes celebrating the happily ever afters a lot funner that way.
Yeah, that's so true.
All right, you talk about what you've put them through, but Lordy, T.I., you put yourself through it by writing it. And we often talk about how books change us as we write them. So can you talk about how this book changed you, or how the characters of Sunny and Hudson changed you?
Oh gosh. Let's see. Every time I write about a hard subject, I think it changes me. It changes me. I can be more understanding of people that are going through it. I've lived, out in the country where, I'm not anywhere near Hollywood, but I think if you pay attention to your surroundings more so, you don't have to have a big voice, let's say in Hollywood or whatnot, that people right around you are suffering, and, just pay attention to people more. And I think that's what I take away when I write these hard subjects.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
We could all walk away with that for sure.
Yeah. A little more empathy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think all of us as writers, if we put our antenna up and they start to vibrate, and then they vibrate a little bit more, and then the next thing you know, you've grabbed a pen or your laptop, and you've gone there.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's one of the gifts of writing fiction is you can do that. You can take those moments that reverberate with you and put them into a story that will reverberate hopefully with your readers, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Wow, we didn't mean to go so deep there, did we?
No, that was great. Yeah, that's great.
We want to thank you all. Thank you, Tia. Hey, don't cry on that.
Don't mess that up, right?
Don't mess that up. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. It was so lovely to see you. And to all of you out there, thank you for joining us tonight. As always, we are deeply grateful for your support of this show, of our books, of our guests and their books, and most of all of each other. Be good to each other. That's kind of the closing word we want.
Yes.
Leave y'all with tonight.
Well, I have to thank you, ladies. I've been a huge fan of this from the get-go. I've been watching Friends and Fiction, and I thoroughly enjoy it as a reader. And to be a guest tonight, Girl, I'm just so honored. Thank y'all for having me.
Oh, we love having
We're
you.
so
We love
happy.
having you.
We're going to let that be our sign off tonight.
Yes.
Girl.
Girl.
We'll see you all. Right. We'll see you all next week. Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Good night,
Good
everyone.
night.
everybody.
Thank